Guys, welcome back to another video, and in this video we're going to be continuing on with our SwiftUI tutorial series, and in this particular tutorial we are going to be taking a look at how we can create menus in SwiftUI. Now, we're not talking about menus in the menu bar or anything like that. That is for a little bit later down the line. But what I'm talking about is, for example, let's say you have a menu, like a pull down button in a toolbar or something like that. You have a menu button inside of a dialogue that might be something for printing or something like that. That's the kind of menu I'm talking about. Now, there are many different styles of menus in SwiftUI. Some are macOS specific, some are iOS specific, some are cross-platform. It just kind of depends on what platform you're using. So we'll kind of go over some of those in this video. Now, how do we create a menu to start off with, right? Let's kind of back up and go to the basics of how do we create a menu. Well, in Xcode, let's say you want to create a menu inside of, inside of your actual view itself, not your toolbar. All right. So inside of our body, we can say capital M menu. And the most basic initializer for a menu is it will take a title, which is a string, which is localized by SwiftUI by default, much like with buttons and text views. And then it'll take a content closure, which we can put in there as a trailing closure, much like with everything else. So menu. Let's say export, and just call it export, right? Or export as, let's say. And so this menu is going to have a bunch of export options or something in it. Then we can open up our menu with a content closure like this. And inside of this content closure, we're going to put a bunch of buttons. Now, each button is going to perform some kind of action. You can of course set roles for these and all of that if you need to. But as it stands, it's not strictly necessary to include like a role or anything like that, because on macOS in particular, the role doesn't reflect like it would on iOS. So we'll say button PDF or export to PDF button export to CSV button export to JSON button export to XML. And there we go. So we have a few options now in our menu. When we run our code, so save it and run it, here is our menu. So it's interpreted as a pop-up button. We have export as its title. When we click it, what it will do then is when you click on it, it brings up that menu. And we can say, oh, we want to export to so-and-so, right? But what if we want to change the style? Right. To make it a little bit easier inside of the view of our, of our window, we can set the menu style, so dot menu style, to say dot button. We can run our code, and here is our menu. You can go into a pop-up button, as it's announced, click it, and it's a little bit friendlier in terms of how it behaves. All right. So that is the button style. There are a few other styles as well. So we get automatic, which is the style of the menu based on its context. We have bordered button, borderless button, button, and that's it, really. All right. So I urge you to experiment a little bit with these menu styles, kind of get it down to what it is that you want your app to look like. Now, we can get rid of menu style here and then run this as well on iOS. So let's go ahead and do that. And go into the run destinations, and we'll run it on the iPhone 16 Pro Max simulator here. All right, so here's the simulator. It's got to load and kind of do its thing, obviously. All right. So we can see that there's a button, an export as button there in the center of our screen there. When we tap it, a context menu shows up, and we get all of our different options. Right? So we have export to XML, export to JSON, export to CSV, export to PDF, all that stuff. So on iOS, the default menu is much more pleasant to deal with than it is on macOS. On macOS, you need to configure it a little bit to get it right, make it a little bit more friendly to work with in terms of its behavior. And if we go into our content view here, and we do .menu style, we can say .automatic, which is, again, the default. This is the style that allows our menu to adapt its style based on where it is in the user interface. If it's in the toolbar, if it's in the body of our view, like outside of a toolbar or something like that. We have borderless button, and then button. So there are, of course, some, right, that aren't here anymore, and that's because like I said, some of them are macOS specific. But borderless button and button are cross-platform. And again, I urge you to experiment a little bit with these. But what if I want to put this into a toolbar? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this out, and then I'm going to have a navigation stack. And inside of this navigation stack, we're going to have a text editor. And it'll have a binding to a state variable called text. So let's go ahead and do that. At state private var text string equals an empty string. All right. And then on our text editor, we're going to place a toolbar. And inside of this toolbar, we will have a menu. And this menu is, again, going to have our export options inside of it. We can save this, run it. We have a successful build. It's got to load and do its thing here. All right, so here's our simulator. So there's our pop-up button there in the menu of our app above our text editor. When we tap it, we again get a context menu with all of our options. Now, what does this look like on macOS? Well, let's go ahead and change our run destination. All right, there we go. So here is our app on macOS. We have a big text editor in here for editing some text. And then inside of the toolbar, we have our menu. And you can click on it, and we have all of our options there. All right, so that is that's how we can add menus to our toolbars. But there's one last thing I want to cover with you today, and that is let's say we want a menu that has both a textual label and an image. Well, that requires a different initializer. So let's go ahead and go into Content View. I'm going to get rid of the contents of this menu here. And then we're going to get rid of the menu here. So we'll say menu. And then the content closure is going to come first. And then the second parameter is going to be a label, which again is also a closure. So inside of here, we can have a label view with export as, and then have a system image of something. We can go into SF symbols here. And find search. It'll say export. We can square and arrow up. We can copy the name. And paste that in there. I realize now that I got rid of the menu items in our pasteboard, but that's okay. So we can say button export to CSV, button export to JSON, button export to XML, like that. So we can save this and run our code. There we go. And here's our menu. You can see that we have our little share or export SF symbol there. And you can also get rid of the label by saying .labels hidden. So using the labels hidden modifier. Go ahead and run that. And there is our menu, but it doesn't have the string label being displayed, just the icon. And so when you open that, we have our options. All right. And if you want your label to be, read by a screen reader, like say export as, instead of labels hidden, on the label itself, we can say .label style .icon only. So save that, run. And now the label is still gone, but we still have the image, and VoiceOver keeps that textual label part of our label intact when it reads it to our users. So there are a few ways to get rid of the actual textual label attached to our menu. One way wipes out everything about the label except the image. The other keeps it intact in the accessibility tree, but not visually. All right, so that pretty much does it for menus in SwiftUI. Thank you all so very much for watching. Make sure you leave a like on the video if you liked it. Dislike it if you didn't. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions. I always look at the comments, maybe not right away, but I try. to answer questions people have. And make sure you also follow me on Twitter/X. I post some more stuff over there to kind of supplement the material here. Sometimes it's not so educational, other times it is. It just depends on what I'm in the mood to post that at any given point. So anyways, that pretty much does it. Thank you all so very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.